Hello, everyone. Sup, y'all? This is Mike J with World News Report. Welcome back, and thank you for joining us here to learn. In addition to scripture from the ancient Ethiopian Bible, we are also reading this book, Christ Was Not a Jew, which should prove quite very interesting indeed. Plus, check out my new Baltimore Ride Tour series. You might like that. As my disclaimer, I have no idea what it has to say, but I am eager to dig in and find out. I'm sure that you are too. So, in our last reading, we started chapter 2. We noted the betrayal of Christ because of Jewish pride denying him, the genealogies of the gospel, Gentile testimonies to the Advent, how his followers actually hindered him from spreading his word by constantly demanding help of miracles to the sick, which he reluctantly stopped to perform, and more. So with that said, please join me in learning more and get through some more of chapter 2. This is part 2. Christ came. What said Christ about his messiahship? It is not upon record, except upon the questionable testimony of one witness, that Christ ever claimed that he was the Jewish Messiah. And even so, there was no intimation, it's a different word, intimation that it was a military or political scene. It was in the conversation with the woman at the well in Samaria. She was the one whom he had told the plain and unpalatable truth about her life, and she immediately confessed. Remember that? No others were present, for the disciples had gone to the village to buy food, and were much surprised on their return to see him talking with her. It is not least likely that he reported the conversation. It was not like him to do so, and nobody asked him a word, but the woman reported the conversation in the village in an excited manner, and we have no other evidence. He said just what she declared. Hence, we have it only on hearsay and from a doubtful source that he ever said, I speak unto thee am he, meaning the Jewish Messiah. Besides, the woman threw doubt on her own testimony by raising a question about it. It must be stated also that neither the synoptic gospels mention the incident. It must be dismissed as inconsequential. Interesting way of looking at it. On the contrary, there were at least 3 different occasions, with several persons present, when Christ, by imputation, repudiated the Jewish messiahship. What think ye of Christ? Whose son is he? This question he addressed to some Pharisees who, being Orthodox Judaists, were committed to the strictly legalistic view, so they promptly replied, He is the son of David. Christ immediately challenged that statement and refuted it out of David's own testimony, and, as we are told, no man was able to answer him a word. How about that? On another occasion, speaking to his disciples, he asked them, Whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? They replied to the effect that some say one thing and some another, but it is noticeable that they do not say the Messiah. Then he asked his disciples plainly, But whom say ye that am I? He gets his answer plainly from the blunt and outspoken Peter. Thou art Christ, the Son of the living God. And Peter did not say the Son of David, as did the Pharisees. Peter got a well-deserved blessing for that answer. And why? Because, as Christ tells him at once, Peter did not get that knowledge from any man. From my Father, which is in heaven. Nothing about the Jewish Yahweh, nothing from Moses and the prophets, nothing from tradition, and nothing from the sanctioned laws of Judaism, but a direct revelation from the Father and the Son. Peter is the first of whom we have any record that he did not repeat the customary palaver about the national hero, the Son of David, the Jews were looking for, and Christ saw that he was the first to discern the state and truth unequivocally. Wow. The third occasion has to do with John the Baptist, who had been in prison during most of Christ's ministry and therefore could not have been fully informed about it. John was alone and disconsolate, with very good reason to apprehend that his end was near. Dark and foreboding thoughts must have beset him when he sent out this message to Christ. Art thou he that should come, or look we for another? ? It was a question that deserved a frank categorical yes or no. In plain speech, Christ was asked by this man who had risked his life in the cause of righteousness, are you the Messiah or not? And Christ did not answer yes or no. How could he? He was not the national hero, if that was John's question, as it probably was. Shut up in prison and not in close contact with Christ's ministry, John could not be expected to have any other than the traditional concept of the Messiah. Would there have been any point to John's inquiry otherwise? Hence, Christ did not and could not say he was the Messiah, which would have meant that he claimed to be the national hero, the very thing he had been repudiating and resisting all the time. Again, Christ could not have been so indelicate to assume in his reply that John's question implied a doubt as to his own authenticity, for neither of them could have forgotten the memorable scene at the baptism in Jordan. His real mission, as opposed to that of a Jewish nationalism, must have escaped John's clear realization, and that indeed seemed to have been on the basis of Christ's reply. And furthermore, it is delicately aimed to support the sorely tried faith of John, poor man, who probably realized that at the end of his life, work was at hand, and he needed to be assured it had not been in vain. Christ's reply followed the dictum of actions speak louder than words. Go tell John that the blind see, the lame walk, etc. Blessed is he. Whoever shall not be offended in me. There indeed was answer enough, ending with just the mildest suggestion of a rebuke that John might take to himself if he chose. Then followed a wonderful panegyric on John, showing that Christ thought none the less of him for being straightforward and outspoken on a matter of vital importance. The pathos of the situation moved him mightily. But in such a situation, had it been possible for Christ to have said positively and definitely, yes, I am the Messiah, the one the Jews are expecting, he must needs to have said it to John without any equivocation or evasion. It was straightforward, honest question that meant more than life or death to John, and Christ submitted his own record as an answer that spoke for itself. How about that? Christ's attitude towards the Gentiles. What was Christ's attitude towards the Gentiles as distinct from his attitude towards the Jews? In answering this question, it has to be remembered that the terms Gentile and Jew were Jewish categories, and that Christ did not include himself in either. He being Galilean, however, the point is settled objectively. It is to be noted next that both terms are used with a varying significance, which leads to a confusion as to thought to be conveyed. For instance, Gentile, when applied to the Romans, their latest conquerors, has a hostile significance, whereas it is neighborly important when applied to the Greeks, Sidonians, and Phoenicians. But there is a third classification which includes the proselytes to Judaism, the Galileans and Samaritans, who looked upon as poor relations by the bigots of Jerusalem. Neither the arrogance of Judea nor the independence and self-respect of the Galileans will tolerate the name Jew to be so misimplied. Though the cult of Judaism was accepted by those outside the Jewish race. Hence, when Christ said to his disciples, "For after all these things do the Gentiles seek," they naturally thought, as he did, of themselves as Judaized, and therefore not followers of the cult of their Gentile neighbors. The mistake is all on our own when we take it for granted that this identifies them with the Jewish race. They would have resented the imputation as other Gentiles do. The confusion, that was a lot to fathom. The confusion in the use of terms illustrated in Paul's use of the category as Jew, which strictly speaking could include only a descendant of Judah. Paul repeatedly speaks of himself as a Jew when he must have meant that he was of the Jewish cult. For we know that he was of the tribe of Benjamin. Okay? The close association of the half-tribe of Benjamin with the tribe of Judah could not make him a genuine Jew. All right, just a couple more pages to go here. Was there a chance in his attitude towards the Gentiles, a change? The various classifications mentioned above forbid generalization. Christ certainly found Gentiles of all classes less obdurate than were the Jews, and more free from the bondage of tradition. They were more capable of looking facts in the face and drawing their own conclusions. In the first recorded instance, his spiritual contact with the Gentiles, the centurion and the servant, Christ marveled, and he said, "I have not found so great faith, no, not in Israel," Judaism, that means. Was he surprised? Was he correctly reported? Was he still under the influence of his early days? It does not agree with his character in history to say that he was surprised, nor is it reasonable to suppose that his early training was predominant at this period. In any case, the compliers of the New Testament canon, some 40 years later, must be held accountable for the correctness of the narrative. None of these suppositions will suffice. It was an outburst of gratitude and a realization of the demonstrated power of the Spirit that he constantly preached, and the fact that it was generic with all mankind, or everyone. Okay, the Greek or Syro-Phoenician women. As one reads and ponders over this narrative, the wonder grows so much of the divinity of Christ shone through and was transcribed, in spite of the density of the transmitting medium. The woman was begging Christ to heal her daughter, send her away, for she is Christ after us, said the disciples. Was Christ indifferent to her appeal? So would it seem from the record. But who can believe that he was? Such a conclusion is inconsistent with his character and also with the sequel of the interview. It is consistent with the university of his gospel, but it is not inconsistent with the chosen race fetish that still held the disciples in its clutches, as it did the Ebionites, who compiled the canon of the New Testament. These might innocently enough have interpolated their own views into the narrative some 40 years later. It is also possible that there were omitted details that would justify a modified construction to be placed upon Christ's reported reference to the dogs. But the record as it stands is indefensible when judged in the light of his character. For her sweetly contrasting humility and her perseverance, she gained her point, and the underlying commendation. O woman, great is thy faith. Be it unto thee even as thou wilt. No one can doubt that those were the words of Christ, whatever may be his conclusion at the preceding dialogue and its authenticity. Two references are to be found where the word Gentiles is clearly used to designate the Romans, and therefore it is employed with neither kindness nor hostility. He simply told his disciples what the Romans would do to him, that he would be arrested, mocked, scourged, and crucified by them. All this was said without rancor, as he did not hold the Romans culpable, as indeed they were not. Again, he told them that in contrast with the Gentiles, the Romans, of course, whosoever will be great among you, let him be your minister. That was a stunning doctrine, for up to the latest moment they had been debating among themselves who should be the greatest in the kingdom they expected him to establish forthwith. The great vision had not dawned upon them at the Last Supper, when, to teach them what he meant, he humbled himself to a menial task by washing their feet, and they didn't even get it then. It took the crucifixion and the resurrection to tell the whole story, but the point we are after here is that the hostile sense of the word Gentile as applied to the Romans naturally aroused a distaste for the word as applied to themselves, the Galileans and the Samaritans, who shared the fortunes of war with their Jewish compatriots. Okay, last subsection. The first missionaries. Another scene stands out vividly in Christ's ministry, demanding an explanation. He had finished choosing his 12 disciples, and he called them together for final instructions before sending them forth without their master. He did not tell them much about what to say, as given in the record, but he did tell them where to go, what to do, and what to expect in return. Go not into the way of the Gentiles, Romans probably, and into the city of the Samaritans. Enter ye, but not go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out devils. freely ye have received, freely give. Provide neither silver, nor gold, nor brass in your purses, nor scrip for your journey, neither 2 coats, neither shoes, not yet staves for the workman who is worthy of his meat. Then he told them he was sending them forth as sheep among wolves. And he told them to beware of them, and he warned them of all the terrible things that might befall of them. It was enough to terrify strong-hearted men, but as he reminded them, the disciple was not above his Lord, and doubtless he remembered the early days of his ministry when they threatened to throw him down a precipice in his own hometown. What does this mean, and why first to the lost sheep of the house of Israel? One may like to think of him as saying this with a smile, since he knew by this time what kind of sheep they were likely to be, and besides, he soon changed the figure from sheep to wolves when he warned them what was in store for them. In fact, he was sending them out on this first missionary journey, chiefly, we may assume, to test them. And it was just the right time to give them the toughest kind of a job. So he sent them among the Jews, who those who wrote the record may have been mistaken for a mark of preference for the aforesaid sheep. If there were any quitters among the disciples, this would be the time and method of sifting them out. And is it worth remembering that Judas Iscariot was among them? Go to those stiff-necked, self-righteous people, as the prophets had so often called them, and do what you can for them. You are going right down through Samaria, but don't stop there. Give the Jews the first chance, for this is their country you are going to begin with, and Samaria and Galilee are right at hand all the time. If you succeed in Judea, you ought to do much better nearer home. Take not a bit of money with you, but earn your way. No extra clothing, nor even a stick to lean upon or drive off the dogs and wolves. If the wolves attack you, run for your lives. Waste no time for the unappreciative. Cast not your pearls before swine, but find others who are more worthy. They have the first call on your services, and I will send you forth with all my healing power. Such, in a paraphrase, was the divine commission to the 12 disciples on their first foreign missionary journey to the Jews, for it certainly was a foreign from Christ's standpoint, and his commission to the disciples reads that way. It was what one might call a tough assignment, but they returned from the mission rejoicing that even the devils were subject to them, a triumph that did not elicit much praise from the master, but it is not recorded that they made any converts on the first missionary enterprise. Throughout Christ's ministry, he found frequent occasions to praise the Gentiles, contrasting them with their last paragraph here, almost done with this read, with their Jewish neighbors, sometimes to the disadvantage of the later. There were 10 lepers cleansed, and only one returned to give thanks, and he was a Samaritan. Many widows were in Israel in the days of Elias, but unto one of these was Elias sent, but unto Sarepta, the city of Sidon, unto a woman that was a widow. And many lepers were in Israel in the days of Eliseus, the prophet, and none of them was cleaned, saving Naaman, the Syrian. And then there were those mighty woes pronounced against Bethsaida Chorazin, and Capernaum, all cities of Galilee. But callous and indifferent to his message, as the Phoenician cities of Tyre and Sidon would not have been. And the gem of all these allusions was reserved for the Good Samaritan, a Gentile, the most disliked and distrusted of all by the Jews. And it was who practiced an ideal in ethics and religion, while the Jewish priest and Levite passed by on the other side. What does that mean? With the vivid picture of the difference between the new revelation through Christ and the antiquated background of Judaism. One is compelled to admit that Christianity came not from Judaism, but in spite of it. Okay, well, that wraps up this read, folks. So, signing out, this is Mike J with World News Report. Please like, share, add any comments, any questions that you might have, because this is a learning thing. So any input would be appreciated. Thank you so much. Much love. Signing out.